So I want to get into the lecture on the trophic pyramid. It's basically a food web or a food chain. It's just those things are so incredibly complicated. Did you get all the pieces? Do you know where all the pieces are going? Scientists decided instead to use a trophic pyramid. So the idea is that the pyramid represents the ecosystem. Okay, so this pyramid is the whole entire ecosystem. And in terms of energy, the ecosystem is open. Most of our energy comes from sunlight. So about 8.5 light minutes away we have the sun. Sunlight travels through the vacuum of space. It hits our ecosystem. We can think of this as the earth, or we can think of it as your backyard. And this sunlight is then transformed through the process of photosynthesis into sugar. And this is done by our autotrophs. When we're growing up in 3rd grade, we call them plants. As we get a little bit more sophisticated, we call them producers. Autotroph, auto means self, troph means feeding. They make their own food. So these guys are responsible for taking the sunlight and turning it into usable chemical energy, sugar. We represent them with this large section of the trophic pyramid because they have access to the most energy. The whole idea of the trophic pyramid is to show how the energy flows through the ecosystem. It's coming from the sun. It gets put into this bottom level, this bottom trophic level, this bottom feeding level. They have access to the most amount of energy. They're then going to pass their energy on to our heterotrophs. These guys have to go somewhere else to get their food. They're eaters. We also call the first heterotrophs primary consumers. These are our herbivores, things like our bunny rabbits. They have direct access to the grass in the field. Our cows have direct access to the corn and the grass. These are our basic plant eaters. These guys will then pass their energy to our secondary carnivores, our secondary consumers. And these are going to be things that are a little bit bigger. A lot of times we think of birds of prey are going to eat mice. They eat the snakes. Snakes would fit in this level real well. A lot of our spiders are going to eat our insects that eat our grass. So our spiders are fitting on this level really well as also. And then these guys will pass their energy on to our top level consumers, our top level heterotrophs, and our top level carnivores. And here, we like to think of the big things, the wolves, the lions, the tigers. Depending on how it works its way through, it could be birds of prey. A lot of our fishing birds are eating at very high trophic levels. Things like our sharks and stuff definitely up there. Now I'm trying to keep this simple. In reality, most of these guys might also be, herbivores when, food runs short. Some of these guys up here, like maybe a bear, but for the most part, when we get to our tertiary consumers, our 3rd-degree consumers, they're basically always going to be carnivores. Working at every single level of this trophic pyramid are decomposers. We call these guys omnivores because they eat both plants and animals. And I use this term FIBS to represent our decomposers. F stands for fungus, I stands for insect, B stands for bacteria, and S stands for scavenger. So FIBS is just basically a mnemonic device to help me remember every single type of decomposer. Now at every single level, as the energy moves from one level to the next, most of it is lost. You have to do things like maintain your body, you have to organize your body, reproduction, growth, maintenance. Most of that energy leaves our body. And we just kind of generalize it in the form of heat. It all gets broken down into its simplest aspect, heat. Now, when we're talking about energy, we've come up with this idea, this rule of 10. If the autotrophs have 1,000 kilocalories available, then our primary consumers are only going to get 10% of that. That's why we call it the rule of 10. 10% of 1,000 is 100. And in return, for every 100 kilocalories on this level, our secondary consumers are only going to have access to about 10 of those kilocalories. And for every 10 kilocalories on this level, our 3rd-degree consumers are only going to have access to 1. Now, this idea is super important for pretty much the human population. As the human population gets bigger and bigger and bigger, no longer can we afford to be these tertiary consumers. No longer can we afford to eat the cow, that's eating the grass, or can we eat, the large fish that are eating the plankton. the zooplankton that are eating the phytoplankton. We can't afford this energy loss. So when people talk about the human population crisis, as we have more and more people on the planet, we're going to have to start feeding lower and lower and lower on the food chain. So think about that. Fill out that worksheet, that note packet, and turn that in as your notes.